Hello and welcome. Today we will focus on cost-based approaches in environmental evaluation. So what exactly are cost-based methods? These methods estimate the value of ecosystem service by looking at the cost that would be incurred if we had to replace, restore, or maintain those services ourselves. In other words, they ask if nature stopped providing a service for free, how much would it cost us to get the same benefit in another way? Cost-based approaches help us understand the hidden value of nature by highlighting expenses we avoid thanks to healthy ecosystems. They are practical, policy relevant, and often used when we need to make a case for investing in restoration. In the next slides, we'll look at the three main types of cost-based methods and see how they work. Let's start with the replacement cost method. This method estimates the value of an ecosystem service by calculating how much it would cost to replace that service with something else that provides the same benefits. It is also called the substitute cost or alternative cost approach. Um, for example, imagine a wetland that naturally filters water for a city. If the wetland were lost, the city might need to build a water treatment plant to provide the same level of water purification. The cost of building and running that plant gives us an estimate of the value of the wetlands water filtration or water purification service. But for the replacement cost method to be valid, three key conditions must be met. Um, First, the substitute must provide the same function as ecosystem service. The chosen substitute must be the least cost option available, and there must be clear evidence that people would actually be willing to pay for the substitute if the ecosystem service disappeared. In summary, the replacement cost method helps us recognize the hidden economic value of ecosystems by highlighting what it would cost to replace that service with human-made alternatives. Here we have a hypothetical example. Imagine a city relies on a wetland for water purification, so a similar example than the one that I showed before. If the wetland is destroyed, the city would need to build a water treatment plant to provide the same level of water purification. The cost of constructing and operating this plant, say $10 million, would represent the replacement cost of the wetlands water purification service. Next up is the avoided damage cost method. This approach estimates the value of an ecosystem service by calculating the cost of damage that are avoided thanks to the presence of that ecosystem. In other words, it asks how much damage, like property loss, infrastructure repair, or even loss of life, would occur if the ecosystem wasn't there to provide its protective function. So let's take mangroves as an example. Mangrove forests along coastlines can reduce the impact of storm surge and flooding. By absorbing wave energy, they help protect nearby communities and infrastructure. The avoided damage cost method measures the value of this service by estimating the cost of damage that would have happened if the mangroves weren't there, such as flooded homes, damaged roads, or lost crops. The implementation of this method is not as straightforward as the replacement cost method. We generally follow four steps. We first estimate the intensity of the hazard, like the size of a flood or storm, without the ecosystem present. Next, estimate how the ecosystem reduced the hazard's impact. For example, how much a wetland reduced flood death or extent. Then we calculate the potential damage to assets, infrastructure, or people in both scenarios, with and without the ecosystem. And then the difference between these two gives us the dollar value of damage avoided, which represents the value of the ecosystem service. This method is especially useful for services like flood protection, coastal defense, or climate regulation, where the benefits are measured in terms of reduced risks and avoided costs. Another hypothetical example, similar to the one that I showed before. Suppose a coastal town is protected from storm surges by a mangrove forest. If the mangroves were removed, storm surges could cause $5 million in property damages each year. The avoided damage caused method values the mangroves protection service at exactly $5 million annually, reflecting the damages that are avoided thanks to the ecosystem. Now let's look at the mitigative or mitigation expenditure method. This method estimates the value of an ecosystem service by calculating the costs people or organizations incur to mitigate or avert the negative effects that arise when an ecosystem service is lost or degraded. In other words, it answers the question, how much do we have to spend to deal with the problems caused by losing an ecosystem service? For example, if a wetland that naturally filters water becomes polluted or is destroyed, a city might need to build and operate a water purification plant to ensure clean drinking water. The cost of constructing and running this facility represents the mitigative expenditures and serve as a proxy for the value of the wetlands natural water purification service. This method is also called the restoration cost method, especially when the focus is on restoring the ecosystem to its original state. The key difference between these and the avoided damage cost and replacement cost method is that here we are looking at actual expenses incurred to address or fix the problem rather than just the hypothetical damages or replacement costs that could have occurred. Mitigative expenditures can include a wide range of actions, such as installing flood barriers after the loss of natural flood plains, treating polluted water after the loss of natural filtration, replanting trees to restore lost forest cover. In summary, this method helps us understand the real world costs that arise when we lose ecosystem services, costs that could otherwise be avoided by maintaining healthy ecosystems. To calculate the value of an ecosystem service using this method, you follow these main steps. First, you identify the area and population affected. You determine which area and which people or assets would be impacted by the loss of the ecosystem service. Then you identify the negative effects or hazards, specifying then what negative outcomes would arise from losing the ecosystem service, for example, increased flooding, water pollution, erosion. Then you gather information on mitigation measures, find out what actions or measures are taken to mitigate or avert these negative effects, such as building water treatment plants, installing flood barriers, or replanting vegetation. And finally, you calculate the cost of these measures by summing up the cost of implementing these mitigation actions. And this includes capital cost, construction, installation, operational costs, maintenance, labor, and any other relevant expenditures. Here we have another hypothetical example. We assume a riverbank forest that prevents soil erosion is cleared for development. And to prevent increased sediment from polluting the local water supply, the community installs sediment traps and silt fence at a cost of $500,000 per year. This annual expenditure represents the mitigative cost or mitigation cost, serving as a proxy for the value of the forest natural erosion control service. Here we have a summary of the three main cost-based methods. First, the replacement cost method. We use this method when there is a clear, feasible human-made substitute that can provide the same ecosystem service. However, finding a truly equivalent substitute isn't always easy, and that's the main, I would say, limitation of this approach. Second, the avoided damage cost method. This method is typically applied when valuing ecosystem services prevent damages, such as coastal protection from mangroves or wetlands. The biggest challenge here is accessing reliable data on the actual damages avoided, which can sometimes be difficult to estimate. And finally, the mitigation or mitigative expenditure method. This approach is a bit more straightforward as it's based on the real costs incurred to mitigate the loss of an ecosystem service, for example, building water treatment plants or flood barriers. The main limitation here is that these mitigation costs often underestimate the true value of the lost service. These compensations or expenditures don't always reflect the full range of benefits provided by the ecosystem. So each method has its best use scenario and its own set of challenges. Choosing the right one depends on the service you are valuing and the data you have available. Let's conclude with a few key takeaways. Cost-based methods help us put a price tag on nature's benefits when there is no direct market value, making the hidden value of ecosystems visible to decision makers. Each method has its strengths and best use scenarios. These methods rely on real-world cost or hypothetical scenarios, so always check if your assumptions are realistic and your data is reliable. Cost-based values are often minimal estimates. They may not capture all the social, cultural, non-market benefits ecosystems provide. And using these methods can support, for sure, better policy and investment decisions by showing what we stand to lose or what we would have to pay if ecosystem service disappear. With that, I conclude this brief lecture on cost-based methods. I hope it has been helpful. See you on the next one. Thank you.